Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show, Gary's here, and we've got lots to catch up on. We've got music tech news, we've got new builds of Windows to talk about, changes at Microsoft in the head of the Surface division. We've got two new Surfaces that I wanted to talk about, building music PCs, EV news, and lots more. So let's get straight to Gary. Gary, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, and that was a fun show last week, talking wavetables.
Oh, that was really cool, actually. I listened back to it as well. It was really interesting.
Yeah. Thanks to Keith for coming on the show last week, and we've got a lot of comments on that one as well. So we've got a comment, just one that I wanted to highlight from HJ Felipe. Said, when Keith selects a sound, said, "This might sound really terrible." He said, "I found it super cool. Immediately reminded me of the noisily four-man emulator sounds Depeche Mode used on their albums in the 80s, and that's exactly what I'm looking for." So that was good. That was good. So yeah, it was quite interesting to do something different. So we like ringing the changes. So I quite enjoyed that one.
Yeah, I mean, some of my developer friends are also really interested in that, because it's a. I mean, your bit manipulation is just a really interesting thing in its own right. So.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and the fact he was using AI to generate future additional waves from it, using some machine learning to do that. Yeah, it's pretty good. In fact, I haven't got the link for it, but I did see there's a new plugin that someone's developed for all the music stuff that's actually an AI singer that you can give it a vocal and it'll reproduce it, but not sampling, using AI to do it. So it's not the original person singing it, but it sounds like the original person singing it. That's the key to it. So I think you can eventually train it on someone. So we're going to see a lot more of this, but I think you could do it so that you could do a cover version of a song. And let's say you wanted to do an Elvis song, you could do a cover version of Elvis song, but you would use AI to generate the vocals, which aren't covered under the copyright, the mechanical copyright. Obviously, the performance, the songwriter, lyric, all that, you still have to pay for that as well, just same as you do with any cover version. Yeah. But it's basically like hiring an Elvis impersonator, but you've got a machine to do it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't come under the original copyright of the actual performance. So, but then of course, unlike hiring an Elvis impersonator, when you want to come and do a Beatles song, you can train it on a Beatles track, and it will do that as well. So we're coming to this stage now where things are going to get very uncanny valley on these things. And in fact, I think I noticed on YouTube now, there's a little thing on the dashboard when you're a creator. You'll probably see this when yours. One of them rolled around and says you should flag content that's got. It's not there now because I think I read it, but to say flag content that is artificially generated. So if you've got a video of maybe a famous person talking, you have to flag that it was AI. So what we used to call deep fakes, AI generated content now, which makes sense because otherwise it's a minefield. But it's interesting that you could do that. I mean, especially for music producers who, traditionally instrumentalists have haven't had the identity, have to create a group, don't they? And you have to get a vocalist in and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, there were quite a lot of. You could effectively don't have to get a vocalist in. You can just use AI to do the vocals. So you're losing something though. I imagine in the authenticity of it, but it's doable. It opens a whole world of issues. It's reminds me a bit like sampling, when sampling first took off in the 80s. And people were initially sampling whole sections of songs and including it in their songs, and there was quite a few hits in the mid to late 80s that were doing all that before the real content rules came. The copyright rules came in for sampling because it was such a new thing, and then people got there was sues, people were being sued and taking the percentages and all that kind of thing. So we're coming around to something similar to that, where the law's got to now catch up to the technology, which is something we've
Yeah.
already had in technology, isn't it? Not just music technology, all technology for the laws to catch up with that. So, yeah, it's an interesting debate, and I'm sure especially a lot of ethics discussions going on. But yeah, it's a crazy world when you don't know whether it's the real singer or a fake one, but that's the way it is.
Mhm.
Right. Some other things I wanted to talk about. We had a build, so I want to talk about that. We had some new Surface devices announced last week, so I want to talk about those. A bit of a change at Microsoft on the Windows Chiefs, and I have got some new content for the ModWave that I want to talk about as well, which I had my highest initial batch of downloads for any content I've done on that recently. I don't know whether you've got anything you wanted to include in this week's show as well.
I'll probably talk a bit EV stuff as well. So
Okay, well, we'll talk about that. So the first thing I wanted to just mention is fairly quiet on this, but we've got a new chief in charge of Surface and Windows today. I don't know if you've seen this. Pavanda Vuluri,
Evander Valuri.
I think you're right. Yeah, it's the new chief of Windows and Surface, because last year the Microsoft split Surface into one group and Windows into another group with two different leaders. But now they're under the same leadership, so Windows and Surface are back together, which makes sense because that's where they belong. I think those two joined together.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that and I spotted that on The Verge that they so it's bringing it into one team. So they'll take a holistic approach between building silicon system experiences that span client, cloud, and AI. So yeah, that makes sense to bring it all together. So hopefully we'll see a bit some innovation from the Surface team, because I think initially we had all with Panos, and he was like yeah, pumped for everything, wasn't he? And there was lots of innovation, and things kind of tapered off, and the speculation that he left because he was restricted on what he could do with budgets and everything else. So hopefully we'll see some interesting stuff coming to the Surface team, because we did have a Surface event last week, but it was a very much business orientated event, wasn't it? So we had two new Surfaces. So let me just drink my monitor around. I can share this. So let me share the screen. Okay, there we go. So we had a Surface Pro 10 for business and a new laptop as well. Look at the Surface Pro 10. This is the Surface Pro 10 starting at 1,199. That's without keyboard. The difference between this and say the Surface Pro 9 that you maybe could get on Amazon or PC World or whatever your distributor is, or directly from Microsoft, of course, is that this is not a consumer orientated device. This is sold directly to business, and now I think you can probably still get it directly from Microsoft, like I did with the Surface Go 4 for business, which Microsoft recommend a dealer, but Microsoft Store is one of those dealers, so you can get it. But let's have a look at sort of the price of this. So yeah, 1,199, and that's for the Core i5 processor, and there's a Core i7 for 1,699. That's expensive. And then you've got these other ones as well. So we've got all the way up to 2,799 for the Ultra 7 with 165 processor, 64 gig of RAM, and 1 terabyte SSD. So these again are premium devices. Let's have a look at the spec on them. They've said the processors. I think they've got some things like one of the best webcams that they've had in a Surface device. Other than that, the actual exterior of it looks very much like the other ones. Same connectors, everything else. It's got a RFID reader for those dual form factor well, it's NFC, isn't it, for not RFID, NFC for doing those YubiKeys are called, aren't they, where you can just do tap as your authentication. So definitely designed for business. Nice looking devices, bit of a premium for if you want it as a consumer, but if you want it as a business, I think it all does all stuff with the Intune and everything else as well, isn't it? For the deployment and everything else, which is corporate based. But and of course it comes with Copilot as well, obviously, as everything everything does now, and comes with Windows 11. Interesting there on the fact sheet it says 11 Pro or 10 Pro. I didn't know you could still get things shipped with 10 as an option, but Microsoft are doing that. I suppose that's for business as well, isn't it? Some are doing.
Yeah, and it's still 10 still in support for business, so yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that was one of the devices. The other one was the Surface Laptop 6 for business, starting at the same price, 1199, and that's for the 13-inch one, and you can go all the way up to 2,999 for the 15-inch 7 Ultra 7 processor, 165, 64 gig, and 1 terabyte. That's a lot of money, isn't it, for a laptop? 2,999.
It is, yeah, it is.
That'd be a good dev machine for you, though.
It'd be a very good dev machine. I don't think I'll be buying one, but I don't know if I justify that somehow.
You can get it grey. Oh, it's the cheap one in platinum, isn't it? The cheapest one in platinum, anyway. Again, really nice devices, and they come the same thing with the NFC reader and all that kind of thing. It's designed for business, and we don't have any info on consumer devices. There are rumours that there's a May event, and we'll see interesting things with that one, but Microsoft don't mention anything, so I don't know anything about that yet. So that will be from the consumer side will be aimed at, but they certainly look like nice devices, the new Surfaces. I'm definitely thinking of whether to get my Windows 10 gaming laptop, which then became my music laptop, is definitely getting a bit long in the tooth now. It's an i5 from 2017, and it struggles with some of the newer stuff, especially the new Core applications. So, but I'm thinking I won't get a laptop, and I'll get a desktop. Perhaps something like, but desktops are awfully expensive as well when you start speccing them up. But I think I might look at the Dell ones, because the i7 Dells aren't too bad, and I don't really need one with the highest graphics card. I'll probably get one with a separate graphics card on it, but I don't need I'm not going to use it for gaming. I just want it for storage. So you just need a bit of fast throughput, so a decent processor, plenty of memory and storage. So I might have a look at that. But I think that's where we need to go back to Pete Brown from Microsoft, because he's written articles and articles about all this. So I think
cool.
That's where we should hear him.
Talking about people from Microsoft, I saw a very neat, they call him now, post on X the other day, from a guy called Dave W. Plummer, to distinguish him from the other Dave Plummer. And he's one of the original developers, I think, on is it Vista or NT? Windows 95, actually. No, it was Windows 95, actually, it was. It was Windows 95 he was working on. And he was responsible for the original format dialogue. And I say he's responsible for the original format dialogue. It's still the same format dialogue as we've got in Windows 11. And he said he was posting on X that he wrote this format dialogue back on a rainy Thursday morning at Microsoft in late 1994. Reporting over a bajillion lines of code from Windows 95 using interface over to NT, and format was just one of these areas where Windows and NT was different enough from Windows 95 that we had to come up with some custom UI. I got out a piece of paper and I wrote down all the options and choices you could make with respect to formatting a disk, like file system, label, cluster size, compression, encryption, and so on. Then I busted out the VC plus 2.0 and used the resource editor to lay out a simple vertical stack of all the choices you had to make. In the approximate order you had to make them. It wasn't elegant, but it would do until the elegant UI arrived. That was some 30 years ago. The dialogue is still my temporary one from that Tuesday morning, so be careful about checking in temporary solutions. I also had to decide how much cluster slack would be too much, and that wound up constraining the format size of a fat volume to 32 gigabytes. So that's interesting. There was a restriction on formatting was due to the actual format dialogue. You think they could have changed the format dialogue? That limit was also an arbitrary choice that morning, and one that hasn't stuck with us as a permanent side effect. So remember, there are no temporary check-ins, as he says.
That's interesting. Some things just stick through. It's a bit like with the MIDI code that Pete Brown was talking about, isn't it? How these things just follow our way through. And it's true. I've never the format one. Yeah, you're right. It does go right the way back. Yeah.
And someone replied to him, "You'd think someone could have sorted out the colon consistency on that dialogue, because if you ever look at it, capacity's got a colon and the file system hasn't got a colon."
Yeah.
So he replied back, "Yeah, I'll see if I can raise a bug for that." But yeah,
I wonder when Microsoft will get round to changing that.
Yeah. And so someone else posted back, "Broken gets fixed, but shoddy is forever." Which I think is a little bit unfair, because it wasn't shoddy, it worked. It did the stuff.
It worked, yeah. I mean, I think we've all had that. I've got a couple of applications that were supposedly temporary workarounds, to only be used for a few months, and like 10 years later, those applications are still in use. Because the temporary whatever was coming never arrived, and people just stick with what they know. And yeah, I think we've all kind of seen stuff like that. But yeah, it's interesting. That's a funny story, that. And talking about development as well, we did get a new build last week.
Yeah.
Oh, what did we get? We got 26085, and I'm afraid to say it was one of the less interesting builds we've had recently. There was just a couple of changes on there. There was let's open that one up. There wasn't much in there. There was no new features. In fact, there was the only real good thing in there was the Bluetooth LE support for the hearing aids and things like that has got a improved UI, or a UI, so you can get to it in settings now. So that was about it. There was a few bug fixes, but that was it. No new features. So I've seen a few people on X or Twitter kind of saying that the builds might split fairly soon now. I think perhaps people seeing build strings. So we may see Dev and Canary go their separate ways again for a while, as Dev, I suppose, focuses on 24H2, and then Canary goes off to next year's builds or something like that. So we may see those split again as well. So Microsoft haven't said anything as we record on Tuesday evening. So if you have got a machine on Canary and you think of moving it to Dev, it's probably a good time. Do it now, because it won't be converged forever, and they'll go. So now is a good window to do that. So yeah, if you want to do that now, and hopefully then we'll start to see some more interesting new features as well coming into the releases. The other thing that I want to mention for this week is if you're, I think I teased this last week, if you're a fan of Vangelis, I have a new sound collection for the Mod Wave, and this has proved to have been quite popular. This has had the most number of initial downloads in the first sort of few hours, that kind of thing you get to see on YouTube. So I'll share my screen so you can see it, but the audio you can get from the video if you want to have a look at that. I don't know if I play the audio, I don't think you'd hear it anyway, but I did recreate the Blade Runner intro on the Mod Wave. Got pretty close, I think, on the intro, and also the Blade Runner end title music as well. Some parts of that anyway I recreated on Mod Wave, and the collection has got, there's about 20 performances and some patches as well, some programs. So all different Vangelis sounds, because Vangelis used that ginormous CS80 synth, and I managed to recreate some of those sounds. So not all of them, because it's such an enormous complex synth. It's hard to recreate on any other synth other than the CS80, but the Mod Wave has got the 4 layers, so I did have a good go at it. I did manage to recreate the John and Vangelis stuff as well. The Find My Way Home and I Hear You Now, those the 80s, early 80s tracks that John Anderson and Vangelis did that into the charts and everything. So yeah, I did really create those. So some epic sort of sounds on that you get from there. So yeah, check those out. and they're a free download as well. But I don't know if you had a go at this. I also did a couple of shorts demonstrating the sounds, and they got quite a few views as well. So I've done a few shorts over the last year, but these are the ones that have had the most traction recently. I don't even you've dabbled with the YouTube shorts.
Yeah, I've done a couple of shorts, and they always do get a lot of traction.
Initially, well, I seem to be they have as you would expect, with things that are short, they have a very short lifespan as well. It seems to be as well. So you get an initial bunch of views. I did the Blade Runner one, so I edited out the Blade Runner bits, the intro and end, and made a short from it, and that got a lot of views initially as you get on the short feed, and then as you go off the short feed, then the views drop away, and then you get into the long tail stuff as things start to come back up. But you get that initial burst of being on the shorts feed. So I tend not to be a watcher of shorts because I prefer my YouTube videos a bit longer and a bit more in depth, but I know that a lot of people don't, and that's the way they consume it.
Yeah, I mean, you could say TikTok generation's used to short content, but I still like long content stuff, and my long content stuff does really well. I mean, my longest video of late has been one of my most successful videos, so it's not guaranteed that something short will do well, but occasionally do. I mean, I did have one which wasn't actually officially short. It was a YouTube, just a 20, I think 25 seconds. It actually lasted long, but it didn't actually I didn't upload it as a short. I just uploaded a YouTube video, and that did exceptionally well. So sometimes it is good.
Yeah, I kind of think it's like the shorts are like fast food, aren't they? So they have an initial hit, but if you want a nice meal, then you watch the YouTube video, the long form ones. But not people like fast food, so nothing wrong with that. So. So I did a couple of shorts teasing the sounds that I've got out of the video, and they did quite well. But the video is actually live now, so that's doing quite well. So there is a free download on there. So I've got a couple of more sets in the works as well, especially if you remember 70s string ensembles and all the curio stuff that came out in the 70s. I've got some of those coming, and then I've got an ambient set. But I've got the wave state plugin and the Op6 plugin as well. So, but they require a bit more grunt from the PC, and it's fine when I'm doing them in the standalone mode. But when I want to use it in a track, that's when my PC starts to struggle. But so I can do some sound design on it, but to really use it with everything else, I need a bit of a beefier PC. But so I've got some sounds on them, but. I do enjoy doing that. It's an interesting challenge I do it with headphones, so I listen to the track and then go to the synth and go, right, how can I do that from scratch, and then go back to this track. I think it doesn't sound right, and sometimes even put one earphone in with the original and with the synth and just try and tweak the sound until I get it to match audially. Yeah,
cool stuff though.
Yeah,
I'm really enjoying listening to your current tracks. They play on fairly regularly on repeat in the car.
Oh yeah, the three new tracks were released a few weeks ago, so they're a bit different. They're a bit more like early 90s Genesis.
Yes, I really like that.
But I think I've got 10 synthwave tracks ready to go. So after Easter, I think I'll be releasing some of those as well. Right. Okay. So. Other things I want to talk about. Have you got some? You mentioned some EV news that we should be looking at this week.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Sort of not quite so positive news for anybody who's bought a Fisker car, Fisker Ocean. They were one of the things I looked at the Fully Charged show last year and did some video on. Fisker Ocean, it was the car which has all the windows which pop down. I mean, all the windows, front, back, and side, and so you've got this sort of like California mode, as they call it. So it's basic. It's a quite clever design, but unfortunately the company's struggling at the moment. So the Nasdaq has just suspended its shares trading in America. Because there was talk of they were basically running out of cash, and there's talk of a merger with Nissan, but that seems to have been put on, has fallen by the wayside. So it's whether they can find enough cash to survive at the moment, but they've stopped actually producing models and stopped actually shipping anything. And we're still doing support at the moment, so maybe there's a future there, but I'd be interested to see. I mean, they are due to be exhibiting at Everything Electric this week, which will be actually, as this goes out on Thursday, that'll be the first day of Everything Electric in the London Excel. I recommend anybody who wants to know anything about electric vehicles, and particularly about home electric heating, there's going to be a lot of new stuff coming out at that event. Probably well worth a trip. And if you're young, it's free to go. So I think
That's really good. That, yeah.
for going free. So and they've also cut the price as well, because of things, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago. So I highly recommend attending. You can turn up the day and buy tickets still, and that's at London itself from Thursday to Saturday. So, but yeah, this should be good. Should be good stuff there. And I'm going for the press day, and it's going to be some interesting car launches going on there. So we're talking that we've seen quite a few bits and pieces. Actually, thinking about it, because this is coming out past the embargo date, I can actually talk about what I'm going to say. So we've got the new smart card, Smart 3, and we're going to see that. The first Ionic N will be there. And a couple of other really cool looking vehicles. So there's do you remember Cherry keyboards?
Yes, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Okay, so Cherry is a massive Chinese manufacturer, and they make all sorts of things, and they probably make parts of the components for some of the Microsoft products. I'm almost certain, because they're a big manufacturer. They actually have a car brand, and in China they call it Cherry, but they think that may be a bit of a problematic marketing in Europe. So they've created a new band called Amoda, and they'll be launching their first SUV, electric SUV, at the show. So that'll be interesting to look at, and that's supposed to be coming onto market very cheaply. It'll be interesting to see if they're better than some of the others in terms of their supply chain, because this is actually, so you may have heard there's been some problems around EV insurance going up through the roof. But I mean, all insurance has gone through the roof, but particularly certain EVs, and that's because the repairers haven't been able to get parts, and the insurers have having to write off cars which were actually fundamentally repairable, because they just can get the parts in a timely manner. Because apparently there's rules about how long they get to supply the parts on a repair before they have to actually write the car vehicle off and replace it for you. So yeah, so that's actually pushed up prices, because they haven't got the supply chains in place. And I know certain companies have said that they're making real efforts to improve on that, and hopefully that will have a good effect. But certainly I've noticed it when with some of the cars, but not just EVs, all cars coming. Since the pandemic, there's always been a shortage of supply of certain parts, and I think that's been a real impact on things. But yeah, that's what's happening in the EV world. We've got a very interesting set of events coming up. So you can't make that the one in London. There's at the end of May. There's also the one in Harrogate as well. So that's closer to you, Ian. So
yeah,
maybe we can on that one. But yeah, so all good, all really good stuff, and worth a look. The other thing I just wanted to mention, which is a sign of the times, is there's been a lot of theft of cables from EV chargers recently.
Yeah.
Which is a pain, and also can leave people stranded if it's happened fairly recently beforehand. So I mean, it's not unheard of for petrol stations to have things vandalised and stolen from them as well. But this does seem to have been a very common thing recently, and it makes you wonder what can actually be done about it, because one of the positives for all the charge point operators of the way they install chargers is they don't have to have people on site. Everything's done remotely. They're not actually on the site to look at the charges. So they know the only time they actually know about them being vandalised is when someone tells them, or the police tell them, whatever was happened. And it does make you wonder from a security point of view what they could actually do about that, because it's almost like you installed. I mean, this has certainly happened at a couple of them where they installed the cables and then immediately cut off again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what they can do about that. I mean, certain the 800 volt cables are much more difficult to steal, because they're armor plated and they're difficult to actually cut into, and maybe things like that are the way to do it. Yeah, so I'm not going to go with the idea that someone came up and one of the EV clubs of actually making sure they were actually powered all the time. I think that would be a bit of cruel and unusual punishment, but
I don't see why not, if that's the risk that they want to take. Still, but yeah, you'd probably they would get, of course, instantly sued, wouldn't they? Even though someone by the thief. So yeah.
But yeah, so that's an issue, and we're going through it. But maybe there's a solution for that, because there's one of the things which has been in the news this week is 100 kilowatt hour, 100 kilowatts, sorry, not 100 kilowatt, 100 kilowatt charging by induction charging. So basically, drive over a pad and it charges your car at 100 kilowatts. I mean, there has been induction charging out there before, but it's been kind of limited around about 30-40 kilowatt. Which takes a little while to charge, but this would actually allow for fairly rapid charging with a pad-based things. And you can imagine a short stretch of road where you've got an induction charger, and as you drive over it, you get 100 kilowatt charging for 15 minutes or so. That's going to give you a fair degree of range.
Hey, if they did that on the M60, you'd be fully charged in the morning by the time you crawl round that.
Crawling along, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they could do that with a 7 kilowatts induction charger.
Yeah, you probably could, yeah. But I mean, that has a lot of implications of where you could do that, doesn't it? I mean, for just without having the physical cable, I mean, it may be expensive, but a car park, instead of having 2 charging points at an office car park, you could make all of them. I know it's expensive to put the technology in, but it's there. It's achievable, isn't it, in the long term anyway, and changes how people use the charging.
Yeah, it actually makes sense that you actually build it into the infrastructure of the roads and that. And I mean, and then if you charge a toll for that road, which covers the cost of the charging as well, potentially, there's all sorts of things you could do for that.
And I suppose but the biggest issue with all this is these technologies are changing so rapidly that if you were to invest, $1 million in the current induction standard and charges, in 12 months' time, you're out of date. You're using the old version, aren't you? And in 2 years' time, so you can't, your investment doesn't have long to recoup on it because of the change in technology. I suppose that's a difficult thing, especially with something like induction, which is underneath, and unless they can come up with some interchangeable thing where the pipe, the electricity pipe comes in and there's a module that fits in, but of course everything like that is changing. I think this is probably an issue for the whole EV space, and not just EV, car and technology space in general, isn't it? Is that technology changes so fast, and when we had it with conventional cars with their entertainment systems, they could never keep up with the phone providers and what was coming out of the phone, and now that's been solved somewhat by Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. But so if a 10-year-old car, if it still works perfectly fine, but all the technology has changed. But within an EV, a 10-year-old EV, the technology is really old, isn't it? As opposed to an engine 10-year-old car, petrol engine car. The engine bit is still to current technology almost.
And I mean, we will settle down. We'll start getting some settling on this. But it's interesting. I mean, someone pointed out to me the other day that the technology for supply of fuel didn't really change from day one. I mean, yes, you went from hand pumps to powered pumps, but basically it's the same connector and the same fuel going in. And there have been some changes over time, since like unleaded and everything like that. But all the innovation was actually in the vehicle. Whereas with EVs, some of the innovation is actually in the charging infrastructure. And that's, and eventually we'll get to a point where that's standardized. We did kind of with petrol. I mean, in the early days, there were all sorts of varieties of fuel out there, and we standardized on the different 4-star, 2-star, and all the variants since of that. But and then your supercars had to have special fuel, and super EVs have to have special chargers to get to the higher speed. But it's going to be interesting when we get proper solid state batteries out there, because they'll be able to charge at sort of megawatts potentially, and that for an infrastructure thing is challenging. But you certainly wouldn't need many pumps with or charge points with a megawatt supply. Because if you think about how quickly you could charge an 80 kilowatt hour battery with a megawatt charger, it's not going to be many minutes.
Yeah.
So
So that changes the landscape again, then, doesn't it, when that's available?
It does, yeah. It becomes more like a petrol station type approach. You go and you charge, you move up, you drive off. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all pans out.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I think that's one reason why it's an interesting thing to space, isn't it? That it's constantly changing, and it's not stagnating. Unlike, say, maybe with phones are becoming a bit all homogenized and standard, and not really. Yeah, the EV stuff is still changing, so that's what does make it interesting. Having said that, I still like my 118 Ti, my new Ti. But there's a lot of electronics on board on that as well, actually, from the previous cars. So it's an automatic and sports mode and all these things. So yeah, you are constantly being removed further and further from the old cable accelerator type thing. I think you once you get to the EV stage, all that's just gone, isn't it? But gradually, you are getting removed from that.
Yeah, I do like the Volkswagen play and pause buttons on their foot pedals. Which is true.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well, is a lot of this technology, and a lot of people don't want to adapt to a new technology, but the younger generation comes in and haven't driven any other technology, so they wouldn't know any difference. It must be interesting with like driving schools and things like that now. You teach, traditionally, you always think, well, you need to learn in a manual. If you want to drive an automatic, that's fine, but learn in a manual and then you can drive both. If you're learning in EV, you would never have any experience of driving a manual, would you? I guess if you pass your test in an EV, go on.
Yeah, or proper automatic either.
Yeah, if you pass your test in an EV, I guess your license is it specific for automatics?
Yeah, it would be an automatic license.
Yeah,
yeah. Unless you've got one of Toyota's magical EVs, they're going to come out with a manual gearbox.
Yeah, this is another thing where the technology is ahead of the legislation.
It is, yeah.
It's definitely an interesting. Interesting.
But I mean, there's absolutely no need to have manual gearboxes these days, anyway.
No. Well, I like my automatic. It's been a long time since I've had an automatic, but I am enjoying mine now, especially my knee. Thanks before it when I'm stuck on the M6 that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Well, with the changes to autonomous driving regs shortly, you'll be able to let your car drive itself on the M60, because it'll be definitely below the limit for the fully autonomous.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And maybe if I get a nice synthesizer in the car, I can do a bit of sound design while driving around the M60 with the autonomous vehicle. But not wearing one of those Apple headsets.
No, not the other. I mean, I could see. I mean, the regulations would all have to change, but I could certainly see AR type headsets replacing all the dashboards in a car. That would actually make a lot of sense, because then you could configure exactly how you want it, and it would be fully heads up, so you'd be able to keep your eyes on the road all the time. Not the Apple AR stuff, not any of those current ones, because they are a distraction, but something specifically designed for the vehicle could make some sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, you can imagine a time when people say, in the future, say, "Gosh, can't believe you should have to look down." You dial.
Talk about looking down and touchscreens. Did you see that NCAP have actually told manufacturers they've got to return some controls to physical buttons, or they won't get the full rating, the full 5-star rating for safety. So, which I think is long overdue. I mean, the move to have everything on the touchscreen, I think, is wrong. I think that there are certain things which should be available for a quick windscreen wipers. I think is one of the things. I'm putting those on, the controls for those on a touchscreen. I think it's just ridiculous. So the return of stalks and buttons for certain things. I think that I can't remember the full list, but it's things like indicators, emergency signals, and windscreen wipers and headlights. I think also have to be available on a button control.
Yeah, that doesn't make some sense. Yeah, I mean, mine's got some things on the touch, but all the things like indicators, wipers, lights, volume, they're on. In fact, you can do it all with it. You don't have to use the touch. You can do it all with there's a rotary control as well. So you can do it all without the touch screen. Because no matter what you think, you have to look at the touch screen where you're touching. Whereas a physical control, you can feel it, can't you?
Yeah. I mean, the one which got me recently was I was test driving one of the new Tesla Model 3s, and they've actually moved the indicators to the steering wheel off stalks, so they're on little buttons on the steering wheel, which is probably great for America, because you very rarely use the indicators other than when you're actually driving with your hands sort of level, because you indicate to come off the highway, and you indicate to go. But here we have roundabouts. You get halfway and your arms are sort of like this, and you're trying to indicate, and there's the indicator. I mean, I know I've talked to other test drivers who do the Model 3, and they say it's actually really not an issue once you get used to it, but even so, it feels like a design decision too far.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. It's one of those where different road layouts, different countries, is different ways. You wouldn't want to be driving around your little country lanes trying to do all that. Yeah, it makes sense. So just I want to mention as well, this week we're talking vehicles, not EV, but this weekend I'll be at Ulm Park for the British GT Championship.
You mentioned, yes,
I'm very looking. So that's on Monday. It's Easter this weekend, so that's on Monday. So I'll be down there. So if anybody's there, you should find me looking very probably wet and bedraggled, because the weather forecast for Easter Monday, as you'd expect in Cheshire, is going to be pretty cold and wet, but I don't care. I'm going anyway. So hopefully I'll get to see some nice cars there. But there's no hybrids on these ones, whereas of course in the 1 Series there are lots of hybrid cars, and that's so that's got a bit more hybrid. And there's a hydrogen class coming year after next as well. In fact, interesting that Extreme E, which is the off-road kind of Formula E series, but it's been they change it to Extreme H, so I think it's next year or the year after, so it's going to be hydrogen based instead of electric based. So if you can imagine, for those big sort of 4-wheel drive off-road type vehicle racing, that actually makes some sense. But I think it's going to be one of the first commercial sort of race series that's usually hydrogen based. Yeah,
and I think there are going to be places where hydrogen makes sense. I just don't. It doesn't make sense for domestic vehicles, to my mind, or even the most transport, because it's just so difficult to transport hydrogen to where you need it to actually fuel up. I mean, something like that series, absolutely, it makes sense. You can have the hydrogen. It's going to be places you can't get electricity to as easily.
That's the idea.
But I mean, it's so it's so difficult. I mean, and also, if you look at the UK, all our hydrogen pumps have closed down. So it's definitely really tricky. But it's an interesting world out there. I mean, I think there's going to be there's all sorts of sources of electricity. I just I feel that hydrogen generally for vehicles is going to be a dead end. There's a lot of place for it. I mean, certainly for planes, it makes an awful lot of sense. But transporting hydrogen is just so difficult. I mean, maybe pumping it around, production at source would be a good approach. Maybe we can have all little fusion reactions producing hydrogen. But then, if we could get little fusion reactions producing hydrogen, just have fusion reactions in the cars and have a Mr. Fusion on the back and get up to 77 miles an hour and do a bit of time travel.
I think that's a good idea. Right, well, on that time travel, we shall leave you this week. So where can we find your YouTube channel with the videos that you mentioned earlier?
You can find me. It's the EV Owner channel on YouTube. Have a hunt for that. So, and you can find me on there, or you can find me on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, and all the other social medias at Gary WMA.
Yeah, and I'm I Dixon. We'll be back same time, same place next week with more news, music tech, Windows news, EV news, and lots more. And if anybody has suggestions for guests for the show as well, happy to hear from you. Happy to also thanks for the comments we've had recently, and so keep those coming. Say if you've got suggestions, let us know, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.